E passo a apresentar o Sr. Professor Sukehiro Hasegawa. He was Special Representative of the Secretary-General of the United Nations for Timor-Leste 2004-2006. Dr. Hasegawa is currently President of the Global Peacebuilding Association of Japan, Chair of the Council of Hiroshima Peacebuilder Center, Director for Academic Exchange and Cooperation of the United Nations Association of Japan, and Chief of the Tokyo Liaison Office of the Academic Association on the UN system. Dr. Hasegawa was Professor of Global Politics, Faculty of Law, was the university from 2007 to 2013. He was Visiting Professor of Tokyo University from 2007 to 2009, and the United Nations University in Tokyo from 2007 to 2013. Professor Sukehiro Hasegawa was a special representative of the Secretary-General of the United Nations for Timor-Leste from May 2004 to September 2006, and head of the United Nations Mission of Support in East Timor and MISET, the United Nations Office in Timor-Leste, UNOTIL, and the United Nations Mission in Timor-Leste, UNMIT. Professor Hasegawa served with the United Nations since 1969, and he had several senior positions within the United Nations system. He served as UNDP resident representative in West and South Pacific, and deputy in Nepal and Indonesia. In 1993, he managed the United Nations Volunteer Electoral Supervisors assigned to plan and administer general elections in Cambodia. In April 1994, he was appointed Director of Policy and Planning of the United Nations Peacekeeping Operation in Somalia. And he was the United Nations Resident Coordinator in Rwanda. He subsequently served as a Deputy Assistant Administrator for Asia and the Pacific in New York from 1997 to 1999. Professor Hasegawa obtained a PhD from Washington University, United States, in 1974. He is married and has 3 children and 4 grandchildren. Professor Hasegawa, you have the floor, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, obrigado, Barak. Good morning. I understand that many of you are from University of Coimbra. I was there just 2 days ago and visited your beautiful library and the campus very much. What a wonderful place that you have. I'd like to thank General Vian for hosting this gathering, and also I would like to thank Colonel Alberto and my colleague, Dr. Victor Angelo, who was a special representative of Secretary General in African countries. I also like to take this opportunity to my tribute to SRCG Mr. Sergio Dumero of Brazil, but I understand that he is a descendant of Portuguese, perhaps family, and he lost his life in Iraq. And also, I like to pay tribute to my former boss, Mr. Kofi Annan, who passed away recently. I would like to share with you this morning the way I saw that the UN peacekeeping and peace building developed over the years. What are the key issues? I don't go into detail, but key issues that faced us practitioners. And perhaps at the encouragement of Dr. Angelo, I will put forward my own perspectives and thesis, which is very, very much far away from the Orient. So, the main question that I have had, and I'd like to share with you this morning, is there any peace? Attaining peace is possible? Immanuel Kant said 250 years ago in his treatise on perpetual peace that we can attain peace if we achieve just society. He was born in 1740 something, witnessed the French Revolution, and he saw the anarchy after the revolution, just as Arab Spring, and end up with Napoleon. And he said, how can we, in fact, not repeat this kind of conflict? I'm afraid that we have witnessed since then many conflicts, the 2 world wars, and we are now facing in a very precarious period. So, how can we do it? And how United Nations has done so, and how now we people from Asia, the Chinese, Japanese, Koreans, how we see it. We can transform what we call heteronymous peace into more autonomous peace. I will just go quickly how the UN has transformed. You know that you have seen this as students. We have 5 stages from conflict prevention, peace building, to peace enforcement, meaning it's the execution of military force. And then keep peace, and we will build peace. And we hope we can sustain the peace and achieve development. Your Secretary for Foreign Affairs, Ms. Rivera, is now in Timor-Leste, where I served 5 years. And she is in a dialogue with the Timorese leaders. How can we not only achieve peace, but also development? And they are having a little bit of problem. And how can we reach that? You know, I was with the students from China, Korea, and Japan just last month at the demilitarized zone between North and South Korea. You know, to bring Chinese, Korean, and Japanese students and to talk about peace in the DMZ is to bring the Jewish, Palestinians, and Arab states students to Jerusalem and talk about peace. Most amazingly, they talk about peace and they come up with the solutions which we, older generations, have never thought of. So I believe in the young people, you challenge the grown-ups and you come up with your ideas of achieving peace. This is one of the first UN peace execution we had. If you go to DMZ, it's 2 states are separated by 2 kilometers of demilitarized zone. They are there, and you know as much as I do that Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump are talking how we can, in fact, complete that state of war and agree to sign the peace treaty. We had a first generation of peace, and it is between the 2 states. And there, we talked about consent, neutrality, and the non-use of defense forces. And what happened was, we have done these things until 1990, the collapse of Soviet Union, and we entered into new era. We thought we will have a peace. I went to Afghanistan, still I was very active in the UN and engaged in peace building. And we are still being engaged in trying to build peace in Afghanistan. And we had disaster. In fact, I was sent in 1994 to Somalia as a director of policy and planning. And in 1995, 6 months after the genocide, to Rwanda, where nearly 1 million people were killed. The global society woke up and found that we are unable to stop that genocide. We wondered why this was so. I walked over the dead body and I looked young. That was 25 years ago. The President Bismung was contesting Médecins Sans Frontières, saying that 8,000 people were killed on that Kibeho incident. That the Tutsi government was saying only 300 people were killed. And we said, look, we cannot just stand between the two fighting parties. We have to be engaged in more multinational peacekeeping. And we have to save the civilian human beings. So we went into the intra-state conflict. And we became very proactive. And we dealt with not only the humanitarian affairs, but also to come up with fragility of state and to build the nations. And we said we have to get out of a post-Westphalian mentality. We have to move on. And I'd like to discuss with you the implication of that. We have to not only manage peace and provide humanitarian assistance, but address development needs in the paradigm of global governance. What it means is we adopted Boutros Ghali's Agenda for Peace and Development, but we went one step further. And Oliver Richmond, in fact, represents that particular theory. He said we have to address the root causes of conflict. And I was young, but I was in Rwanda, and we said one of the root causes of conflict is the police forces beating their own people and even killing instead of protecting their people. How can we, in fact, transform that? So, what are the root causes of conflict? I would like to ask you people, maybe we can develop more, but just take a moment and may I ask you, just somebody, what you think is the root causes of conflict? Yes. Yeah. 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 One, this side, somebody. Boundary issues and so forth. Yeah.
Cultural and ethical issues, as well as boundary or frontiers.
Yes,
Those are
ethnic
often
strife, cultural differences, very much so. Yes, These are, in fact, fundamental causes. But do you know what I found out in my assignment and dealing with these leaders of these countries in a conflict? In fact, it is the leaders who turn around the cultural ethnic divides to perpetuate their rule and dominations. So it's a two-pronged process that some people or some leaders would find it very opportune to use one people against another. And do you know what? Who learned that particular lesson? My good friend, and some of you might have heard the name of Shanana Guzman. Anybody who knows Shanana Guzman, can you tell me? Yes? He is? Yeah, he's a key leader in Timor-Leste. When I was there, he was the president of Timor-Leste. And he then found out that his rival, Maria Alcatri, took Portuguese constitution and made sure that the president cannot fire prime minister. So constitution says president has no power to change the prime minister because president was Shanana Guzman and Maria Alcatri was the prime minister. Now, when they became in a conflict in 2006, he slipped his tongue. One of these evenings, he said, yes, we have a difference between the East and the West. You know, Timor-Leste is 1/10 of Portugal. It's 1 million people, small. Yet, do you know what happened? When the leaders say there is a difference between the East and the West in the small places, it's like a difference between Lisboa and Coimbra. People says, yes, we are different. And they started burning houses that night. And so, Shanana Guzman went on the television and the radio, oh, it was a joke, please. You know, we are all the same. And that's what happened when I went to Rwanda. Tutsi said, Hutu government said, Tutsis are there to get you unless you get them. And this is very dangerous. When the people in authority says it, many people take it to their heart and start butchering. So what I find is this. When you talk about root causes, I would say ethnic, religious, and other things. But also the mindset of the local leaders have to change. And these people are, in fact, used by these leaders. And another thing I learned when I was in Somalia is this. People in the countries in the conflict or developing countries in Africa, Asia, and the Middle East, please do not underestimate their intellectual capacities and abilities. I think countries in the Western countries or developed countries continue to think that people in these countries are not smart and educated. When the United Nations decided to close the mission in Somalia. I was the director for policy and planning, and I had 13 national officers who had an intelligence network on which crown is now acting against which group and so forth. And I told them, sorry, United Nations got exhausted. We have been here for 10 years. You don't get together. You don't build your one country, one nation, and the peace. We give up, we leave, and bye-bye. But I said, I feel sorry, you national officers, we get to know each other very well. Do you know what he said to me, one of them? Mr. Hasegawa, don't worry. I will be in Norway before you get home, not Finland. You must know the difference in application of the refugee conventions among Finland, Sweden, Norway, and Denmark. And I know which criteria I meet. I go there. What I'm saying is that they know as much as we know what's happening and so forth. So, my contention is treat or deal with the people in the developing countries as an equal. Don't try to look down and tell them that they have to follow our rules. They let them be in a dialogue with us and find out themselves what is good for themselves. This is the nature of conflict from 1946 to 2017. What is happening during the last 3 years? First of all, this is by region, and as you expect, this diagram confirms that many conflict is indeed in Africa, that is in the yellow, and blue, and also western part of Asia, that is yellow, meaning Afghanistan, Middle East, and so forth. And this, in fact, shows for the last 3 years, new things is happening. It is not the return of Cold War, but it is the intervention by major powers or key external forces to intervene in this intrastate conflict. So, newly emerging causes of complex contemporary conflict is, in fact, as said, it is beyond ethnic now. It is going into the religious confrontations and the new great power rivalry and intervention. So, how can we achieve, this is my theme of communitarian autonomous peace. My colleague, Jose Ramos Horta, headed this commission of UN to make recommendations. And he said that basically it is the political agenda. It is not the military solution that will solve the problem. And Mr. Guterres gave us just last year and this year, he calls it, Secretary General Guterres, Search for Peace. Basically, in support of political solution and regionalization, for example, African Union, and triangular partnership, that is donors and providing better training and equipment, and peace-building leadership should be recognized. And do you know what it means is? Peacekeeping leadership being recognized. Has any one of you served in the UN peacekeeping forces? I think some are. General, yes. And UNIFIL. Amperfor, yes. Well, that's more sort of traditional, yes? UNTAED and AMISET, that's very familiar. And they found out, and if you join them, you will find that the UN peacekeeping mission force commander has no authority. He cannot command their troops. Their troops always listen to Portuguese contingent, listen to Lisbon. Americans to Washington. Australians to Canberra. And the Japanese mission there listens to Tokyo, who says, don't ever get in a fight. If there is a fight, you come back. That kind of things. You see? So we are not as a one group. I don't know if you agree. We can discuss later. Very much I'd like to hear your views. You know, peacekeeping leadership, no conditions to be attached by TCC, PCC, meaning troop and police contributing countries. Please, you let us work together. And mindset has to be changed. And the host country to provide full support, and so forth. Now, recently, General Alberto dos Santos Cruz, one of your colleagues, called for use of overwhelming force to protect peacekeepers. I think he's right, in the sense that if you are to have firm control of the situation, you have to have overwhelming force that the UN peacekeeping forces do not have. Of course, it is different things. There's a debate that to protect us may be a little different. I move now talking about the heteronomous peace and autonomous peace. That's my own idea of bringing about more achievable peace. What it means is the strength of nation derives from the integrity of the home. That's what the Confucius said. Do you know, by the way? Confucius and Lao Tse, they are born about 50 to 80 years before Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. And I have learned a lot. But yet, what these Western thinkers or philosophers and what the Chinese philosophers are saying is very, very similar. And their message is, in fact, to live a good life, you have to have acceptance of what makes you happy, and that may not be democratic in principle. We had in Japan 250 years. We closed our country. Portuguese came. They said, you can have more happier life if you accept Christianity. And Tokugawa shogun said, what is that? And as he learned, he said, it's very, very frightening. Our society will become up and down, and so forth. Anyway, we had a 250 years of peaceful country that is very hierarchical. 5% of samurai ruling 10% of artisans and merchants and farmers. So, is that the peace we want? No, said Immanuel Kant and Oliver Richmond. We want the democracy. Now, can we, in fact, insist on the democratic principle? Yes, I think we can, but it has to be, in fact, introduced, accepted and introduced in the stages in which society can take it. That's what I call it autonomous peace. And we do have a community of nations, starting European Union, for example, is making progress, although you may have some Brexit and some hiccup. But I think Africa and other areas, they have their own communities. And my own suggestion is make communities primarily responsible for maintaining their own peace. Don't try to just impose what we think that they should have. And I must congratulate the leadership taken by Portugal and Timor-Leste in forming what they call G7 plus of post-conflict countries. They are saying that we, not developed countries, we are going to find a way to sustain the peace. So African and Arab communities' autonomous leadership is committed to community interest and the integrity with the third kind of freedom, what Immanuel Kant talks about. What is a third kind of freedom? You know, United Nations and the government, we all talk about freedom. That consists of 7 freedoms for human rights, 4 civil political freedoms of association, freedom of expression, all these things, plus economic, social, and religious freedoms. But we are forgetting the third kind of freedom, what Immanuel Kant talks about. What is it? Anybody? It is a freedom from our own greed and what he calls it inclinations. We tend to be controlled by own desire. The more we have, the more we want. Money and power, for example. If you earn 10,000 euro a year, very good. But you want 1 million euro a year. And if you control one place, you want to control more places. That is the third kind of freedom. And integrate communal and universal values and balance past and the future and the ability to transform the mindset. Okay. Now, Secretary General Guterres appointed for the prevention of the conflict these 18 advisors, and they are in action. I think it's good, but I would support that initiative with my own conception of community grouping. For example, Japan, just last month, brought together African leaders. And we said, look, we like to help you, but we don't know how you can achieve your peace. So please, you play a key role in trying to come up with the solutions among yourself. And we can help you. We said we are doing at RDEC, based in Nairobi, that how the African troops can engage in fact, infrastructure, construction, and so forth. Here, I'd like to finish my presentation. That is, it's important. If you, Sun Tzu, he said, if you know the enemy and yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. In other words, there's a 4-box. One is, it's a worst scenario. You don't know yourself, you don't know your enemy. There's 100% you lose war. That's what my country leaders did going into the World War II. You don't start fighting militarily with the United States. They get you. You can threaten them, but don't actually go into there. You end up with the Hiroshima bomb. Right? We didn't know them, and we ourselves, we didn't know it. Our Tokyo headquarters of Japan during the World War II could not stop our own contingents going into China and start trying to take more territories. We told them, stop it. But in other words, we didn't have our own knowledge and our control. So the Sun Tzu says, if you know your enemy, and more importantly, if you know yourself, you can, in fact, win the battle that you don't have to be engaged. Now, last one. There's a 2 tales of peace. So far, when I was a special representative of Secretary General, as a good UN civil servant, I advocated very much. And I still think it has a merit of bringing about a democratic society, meaning that that is something that John Rawls, please read it if you are interested in this, in his book on the theory of justice, published in 1970, that if we have a just society, we can have a peace. In the Orient, the peace is written like that, meaning that we have a different groups, but respecting each other's position, that we are not trying to change your partners, accept them as they are. So, I will finish this, that the problem we face today cannot be solved at the level of thinking that existed when we created. That's what Albert Einstein said. And Einstein said, pen is mightier than sword, but the imagination is more powerful than knowledge. Thank you. Obrigado, Barack.
Thank you very much, Professor Asagawa. Now I'm going to open the floor to our audience. I think it's a very good opportunity to make some questions. Don't be afraid, don't be shy. Just, and if you have any difficulty with English, you can make the question in Portuguese. I would be very happy to translate. It's the same for who is following us from Porto and I believe Coimbra. If you have any questions, just raise your arm, please, so I can pass the floor. Okay, thank you very much. So, who is going to be the first? Dr. Isabel, please.
Thank you very much for sharing with us your actually outstanding ideas. So I would say arigato. Thank you. I would like you just to share a little bit more on your experience, knowledge on East Timor and the specific challenges regarding East Timor and how to address the global state or region needs, and of course, as you mentioned, by changing the mindsets, that's important, not to impose, but try to understand their needs. And actually, what would be the chances of cooperation? And I'm referring to Portuguese and East Timor cooperations, for them also to participate in peacekeeping and peace-building actions. And whatever needs to be done needs also to be sustainable, not just, today it works, tomorrow it ends. Thank you.
Thank you. Should we have more questions from the audience? Okay. Don't be shy. There are no silly questions.
Arigato, sir. What are the new solutions given by the students when visit the militarized zone in Korea Peninsula?
Thank you. I'm going to allow 3 questions at the same time, so we have another candidate, please.
Thank you for your presentation. Something that really stuck with me was the fact that you talked about how leaders turn around their cultural devices to perpetuate these conflicts. And I wanted to know, what is the UN doing to prevent this? And if there is a way for us average citizens to recognize these patterns in cultural deviation, and if we can do something to prevent it before it's too late. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I invite Professor Azegawa to
Yeah,
address these 3 questions. Thank you.
First of all, Madam Isabel, I think, in Japan we say arigato. We learned from obrigado, and we use a button. We have about 20, 30 Portuguese. We have adapted. One of the things Japan does is we adapt, we take, and try to see if we can improve it in a way we like it. So, arigato. I think how we can bring about the cooperations and also sustainable arrangement, if we can apply that approach towards our own engagement, I think whether we have a current administration in the United States, I'm not at all worried. Maybe not in the same sense as you are. We may have another big war, but we cannot change the historical progression. We are going into more and more globalized society. And I think we have to move along that line, then I think we can sustain it. For example, take a case of UN peace operations, particularly police force. Not to talk about military, it's difficult. When I was in East Timor, we had a Portuguese police, very good. They are very gendarmerie, but you call it a special name. they go around and they're very effective. Timorese people are afraid of Portuguese police because they can beat them up and so forth. But other police, they don't do that. And here comes the problem. We had Australians and the Portuguese, they are working hard in bringing about a justice system and the police system. And the Australian says, no, we should do it this way. And Portuguese says we should do this. I think we have to have one approach. Because police commissioner of Timor-Leste, Longino, he said, Mr. Hasegawa, you have been here for 10 years. You always say our police are not behaving. Don't you think maybe it's not always the students, maybe teachers are not so well doing? I think United Nations, you have to get together and work as a team. So that's my... On the Korean Peninsula, students don't talk about all these demarcations. Students talk about what can we do together more. And they are interested in how we can make best digital programs and digital corporations and so forth. In other words, to them, it's there, but they find it's something very artificial. Every time it happens, we have assembly of all former UN ambassadors and so forth. And we talk about territorial issues and so forth, and we get stuck. Whereas the students, they talk about what they can do more. And that, to me, is a difference. And the third one, on the cultural issues, I think, I don't know, maybe this is something you don't accept, but I come from a country, in a way we have a problem. We, like Portugal, we have a shrinking population in Japan. But the Japanese are not used to be able to dialogue with other people. So they are just keeping themselves and not really accepting more immigrants. Whether it's good or not, we don't know. The Prime Minister says, yes, we have a labor shortage. Okay, we have to create the daycare centers at every railroad station so that the women can work. The women's participation in the workforce in Japan is higher than that of the United States. It's about 80% now. And me, I think that the cultural, ethnic, other kind of harmony can be achieved more when the people are educated and they become more tolerant each other. I think you cannot, to me, bring in massive people at one time, and as the United Nations says, that we should just dump everybody and integrate, let them do it. I think it's possible, but the cost is very high. So what I recommend is this, in my own approach very much, is that I think we should expand our exchange program. We should have a massive sort of education program from south and the north and the east and the west. And as you know, United States and Australia, they take a lot of students, and I think Portugal is doing that. And I think Japan, we are learning. We are trying to open up, but the problem we have is the language. Portuguese is widely spoken and used, but nobody, in fact, can use the Japanese language. So how we can do. We are adapting English, but I think that the student exchange program is one good way of going.
So, I'm going to take another group of 3 questions. Who dare to?
Is there any specific advice from your own experience that you could give to the students present today, which in the future will probably be going to the UN or other organizations to help resolve conflicts around the world? And thank you for this wonderful and very interesting presentation.
Good afternoon. Thank you for your presentation. Could you please comment on the collaboration between Russia and Japan and the main goals in your point of view of this collaboration? Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. I would like to know your point of view on the crisis and war on Syria, and how can leaders of today and organizations resolve it and create peace?
Thank you very much. So I invite Professor Azegawa to address these 3 interesting questions, I think.
I think, first of all, if some of you are interested in, let's say, joining UN or international organizations and the work, I think, yes, I think it will be great if you can go as an intern or otherwise, but to try to find out yourself, just as Lao Tse said. Is it something you enjoy doing? You have to find out what makes you happy. And I think if you can find out what makes you happy, you will find it. That it's something, we call it in Japanese, you feel your worthiness. And also, you are, in fact, enjoying, maximizing your potential. And I think in international organizations, yes, when I was joining United Nations in the 1968 and 9, I went to New York and I started an internship. And then they said, okay, we can give you a regular job, but you speak only English. How about second language? Can you imagine? So I had to learn French. It's like for you, if they say, well, you speak Russian, but how about Chinese? It's difficult, yes. So, but it's getting to be now more and more, I think English has become a language of universal use. But I think it's the most important thing is, please find out, is it something you enjoy doing it? And you think you do, but you'll find that you may not. Huh? That's the key. On the Russia-Japan thing, I think my own feeling to Japan and Russia is this, that Japan has not given up easily on this. We have some of you may know, we have 4 small islands north of Hokkaido that Japan says, we are there, but your soldiers came. We had a non-aggression treaty, but you took over. And the Russians said that, well, it was an act of war, and that it's already done and finished, and so you have to give up, basically, on that. And I think territorial issue is something it's like your backyard with the neighbors. It becomes a possession, and you never want to give up. And to me, if we can do it, as you have done in Europe, you don't have a border anymore. So we are saying that we can try to have these islands that we can go in and do, together many things. But when it comes to ownership, we get stuck. Now, on Syria, I visited Syria before all these things happened, and it was peaceful, but it was not democratic. And to me, I think I go to Cairo twice a year, and I talk to my friends in Cairo and surrounding countries, and that again, I think their leaders, they have to change their mindset and bring about a change. And I think here is the thing: if you are interested on this, please read Amartya Sen's A Theory of Justice. This is reply to John Rawls' The Theory of Justice. In other words, Kantian justice is absolute. What is right regardless of consequence. You do not lie, for example. You do not lie under any circumstance. That's Kantian justice. Amartya Sen says it depends on the consequence. So I think on these things too. I think in the democratic society, how you can bring about the democratic society, but at the same time, democratic society is not perfect, and we have to continue to change, and that's something which we should really strive at.
Yep. Now let's have the questions. So.
Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Hasegawa. I also share the same feeling that a democratic regime is a fertile land for more peaceful interaction between people. And I want to know your thoughts on the rise of far-right movements and leaders all over the world. Why is that happening right now? And what are the consequences for that in the peace, worldwide speaking? Thank you, sir.
I think basically democracy is very inefficient. And I think in this rapidly changing age of globalization, you have to do many things in a short time. And that requires authoritarian rule. Please visit my country and also China. How fast China is changing. It's 10 times the size of Japan. And Japan is 10 times the size of Portuguese population. And to change China is an enormous work. But one thing, they are united. To me, maybe they have to also tone down a little bit, but they feel that they have been humiliated 150 to 200 years ago. The Western powers came in, you took Macau, British took Hong Kong, and they started going in, Russians came down, Japanese went, the China was chopped into many parts, and they are humiliated. And so they are united that this time they will be together. And the Japanese are very afraid of China. China is going to come and even conquer Japan. But you know, I have made many good friends among Chinese, and Chinese says, for the last 2,500 years, China has never invaded Japan, but Japan invaded China or Korea a few times. So they said, look, please, you know, you have to trust us. But I think the problem is that the authoritarian right, they emerge. In Japan, in the 1930s, the military took over from Democrats. Because, why? Because in democracy, we are supposed to be tolerant to each other, and the worst thing is corruption continues to increase, as it is the case even in East Timor. And you have to deal with it, and to do, and to get the things done. You know, one thing I don't know, Portugal, one thing I noticed, you know, it's a beautiful country you have, but maybe you can change one thing. I think your train looks a bit rusty. You know, your train, beautiful train. I think you can change your train, you know, but how can you do it? Maybe you need some authoritarian rulers to, you know, get it done, kind of things. But to do, while doing so, you have to protect the basic freedom and human rights of the people, and we don't go in the wrong track. And I share with you very much that I hope that this resurgence of rights and extremism, they will not collide. And it may. We had World War I, we had World War II. In World War I, we had 30 million people dead. World War II, 60 million. And if we have another one, 100, 200 million people. But I'm convinced that we are moving towards, slowly but steadily, the one humanity. If we had aliens, UFOs from Mars or Jupiter coming, I think Americans, Russians, and the Chinese, we all get together to defend the Earth. But we don't have that people from the Mars trying to attack us. But I think we have technology. Technological advance can bring a catastrophe to us. And I think we have to control it. And we have to manage it. And to do that, we have to have one global governance. I know I am echoing our Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, may not be particularly shared by Washington and many other capitals, but I am not worried about it. For the next, I would not be here to see it, but in 30, 50 years, you will be alive. I'm sure you will see 50 years from now, or that we will be more united, more governing ourselves together. It's a European Union in the bigger scale, but it's not society dominated by European ideas only. And if I can just conclude, what the Socrates, Plato said, and what the Confucius, they are all pursuing three things for the rest 2,500 years. What is truth, goodness, and beauty? And to me, the challenge is the last one. Because I went to Pacific Island of Western Samoa as a UN representative to help the Samoan people to develop their country. And do you know what the Samoan minister said? Thank you, Mr. Hasegawa, it's very good, but if we develop, we want to be as small as you are. feel they are huge. Huh? To them, big is beautiful. Not like in Paris, this slender lady. No, that doesn't look so beautiful. So to me, what is beautiful? I think if we can come to that together, I think we have achieved the peace. And finally, I would like you to join me to really think that we think that the Western civilization or Eastern civilization, okay, we had 100 years before, after, or 500 years before Jesus Christ, we have started our quest for humanity, wonderful, and so forth. And the Pythagoras said, King, 2 plus 2 is not 22. Pythagoras said, 2 plus 2 is 4. What a discovery. Wonderful. But can you imagine 2,000 years before 2,000 years ago? That is 4,000 years ago. Egyptians built the pyramid. I think we have a lot to learn from them. Thank you.
So I think it's a very good way to finish our presentation. It's a Japanese side. For us, it's a little bit different. I thank you, Professor Hasegawa, for the approach he took to these matters of the United Nations. It's quite a different approach for me. I worked there for 3 years, and I always learn very much from people who live this kind of things. So now, before leaving the room, I say that the lunch is going to be served at 12:30, so don't rush, we have time. And now I invite everybody to take a photo with Professor Hasegawa, so stay in your seats. We just make a small picture of all the audience, and I think it's going to be a nice souvenir for everybody. Thank you very much.